They never thought you'd walk away until the silence hit harder than any argument ever could. Avoidants don't break down when you cry, only when you stop. This is the moment the avoidant realizes they weren't avoiding you, they were avoiding losing you. They always believed you'd stay, no matter how distant they became, no matter how many times they shut down, no matter how many walls they rebuilt, brick by brick, you always came back. You always reached out. You always tried to understand them when they didn't even understand themselves. But then came the day you didn't. Your silence wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't meant to punish. It was the kind of silence that happens when your heart finally cracks in a way that can't be patched with one more apology or one more "I'm just not good with emotions." And for the first time, they felt it, not the fear of closeness, but the fear of loss. At first, the avoidant tries to rationalize it. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they need space. Maybe it's nothing. But the longer your silence stretches, the more their defenses, those walls they spent years building, begin to shake. Because this isn't the silence that comes after an argument. This is the silence of someone who's done all the fighting they could, someone who has nothing left to give. And that's the moment their chest tightens. They begin replaying everything. The times you needed reassurance and they pulled away. The nights you opened up and they shut down. The moments you asked for connection and they mistook it as pressure. They remember how your voice shifted, how it grew quieter, tired, defeated. They remember how you stopped asking, stopped trying, stopped reaching for someone who never met you. And suddenly, all those "I don't care" moments, they realized they cared more than they ever admitted to you or to themselves. Guilt doesn't hit an avoidant loudly. It hits slowly, steadily, like water rising under a locked door. It fills their mind with every ignored emotion, every missed chance, every moment they pushed you away, thinking you'd always be there to pull them back. But you didn't. And that's when their walls finally collapse. Not because you left, but because they finally understand what they lost. Avoidants don't fear love. They fear the moment they recognize it, right when it's gone. Their usual coping, detaching, rationalizing, shutting down, suddenly stops working. Because losing you isn't hypothetical anymore. For so long, they relied on these emotional escape routes to protect themselves from vulnerability, believing distance was safer than intimacy. Whenever things felt too close, too overwhelming, too real, they retreated into silence like it was their safest shelter. They always assumed you'd wait outside those walls, knocking gently, reassuring them you weren't going anywhere. But now there's no knock, no message, no soft attempt to pull them back. And that's when the first crack appears. Not just in their defenses, but in the story they've been telling themselves for years. They thought they needed space to feel safe, but the silence left in your absence doesn't feel like space. It feels like loss. It feels like something slipping through their hands that they never learned how to hold. Their coping mechanisms, once so reliable, now feel like traps. They built around themselves without realizing those walls also kept out the very person who cared for them. The distance they once chose now feels suffocating. The emptiness they used to hide and now feels sharp. For the first time, detaching doesn't bring relief. It brings panic. Rationalizing doesn't calm their mind. It exposes the truth. Shutting down doesn't protect them. It isolates them. The emotional numbness they relied on starts to melt, and they're forced to feel everything they avoided for so long. The moment their chest tightens, they replay everything you tolerated, every time you tried and realize you didn't break. They broke you. The moment hits them quietly, but deeply, like a slow ache spreading through their chest. They remember your patience, the softness in your voice when you asked for connection, the way you always reached out even after they pulled away. They replay the nights you stayed awake trying to understand them, the days you waited for emotional presence they struggled to give, the times you yearned your heart only for them to meet you with silence. It all comes back in snapshots. Your disappointment, your slowly dimming hope, your tired smile that tried to hide the hurt. They remember the way you started talking less, needing less, asking less. They told themselves you were fine, that the calm meant things were stable. But now they see it clearly. You weren't fine. You were shutting down because you had been carrying the relationship alone. They remember the moment your tone shifted, not angry, Not frustrated, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from loving someone who keeps their heart locked behind fear. And that's when the truth hits them hardest. You didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because caring alone wasn't enough. They broke you, not with cruelty, but with absence, not with harsh words, but with emotional emptiness. And now, with the weight of regret pressing on their chest, they realize the deepest irony. They were terrified of being hurt, yet it was their fear that hurt the person who loved them the most. The internal panic, it's quiet panic. Not loud, not dramatic, a sinking feeling I pushed the only safe person I had away. This kind of panic doesn't come with shouting or chaos. It arrives silently, settling into their chest like a weight they can't lift. Avoidants don't spiral outward, they spiral inward. Their mind begins to pace, replaying your last messages. The softness in your voice that slowly faded, the warmth you offered that they never knew how to hold. They scroll back through conversations, noticing the shift they once ignored, the way your sentences shortened, how your emojis disappeared, how your good nights turned from affectionate to detached, and suddenly they feel something they've spent years running from fear. Not the fear of closeness this time, but the fear of losing the one person who made closeness feel less terrifying. The panic spreads quietly, a slow realization that they weren't protecting themselves by holding back. They were sabotaging the one connection that ever felt genuine. It hits them in mundane moments. When they pick up their phone expecting your message, when they check social media hoping you posted something, when they go to sleep and feel the absence where your voice used to be, they start questioning everything they once believed, the idea that needing someone was weakness, that staying guarded kept them safe, that pushing people away meant they'd never get hurt. But now the truth is painfully clear. Their walls didn't protect them. They cost them the one person who showed them real safety. And the panic deepens, not because you left, but because they finally understand why you had. The guilt they can't outsmart. Avoidants are great at avoiding emotions, but guilt, that one gets through the armor. Guilt is the one emotion they can't detach from, the one feeling that slips through every defense, like water seeping into cracks. They can rationalize their fear, justify their distance, explain away their silence, but guilt lingers. It whispers reminders of the moments they failed you, the times you were vulnerable and they chose withdrawal. The chances they had to choose closeness but instead chose comfort and avoidance. They begin to see every small hurt they caused, not because they meant to, but because they never learned how to stay emotionally present. And that's the part that haunts them. The realization that you weren't asking for something impossible. You were asking for the bare minimum. They think about how many times you tried, how many times you gave them reassurance, softness, patience, and how they gave you uncertainty, walls, and half-present love in return. The guilt gnaws at them in a way they can't reason out of because now they see the pattern clearly. They didn't lose you because you stopped loving them. They lost you because their fear became louder than your effort. And guilt becomes the emotion they can't escape, the one feeling they can't numb, the weight that reminds them every day that they didn't just push someone away. They pushed away the safest place their heart ever had. The realization that stings, you weren't asking for too much, you were asking for the bare minimum, and they couldn't give it. Until now, when it's too late. This realization doesn't arrive gently. It hits them like a slow sinking ache in the chest. They start replaying every moment you reached out, every small request for reassurance, every quiet plea for emotional presence that they brushed off as unnecessary drama or pressure. But now, with the clarity that only loss can bring, they finally understand you weren't demanding grand gestures or impossible expectations. You were asking for consistency, for communication, for effort of the smallest signs that they were emotionally in the relationship with you. Things that should have been simple: answering a message, expressing care, meeting you halfway. But their fear distorted everything, made even the smallest acts of closeness feel overwhelming. Now, as they sit in the emptiness created by their own defenses, they finally see how little you asked for and how much you gave in return. The realization burns because it exposes what they never wanted to admit. The problem was never that you were too much. It was that they offered too little. They thought they had more time. They assumed you'd continue carrying the emotional weight for both of you. But now the space where your presence used to be is hollow, sharp, undeniable, and they finally feel the sting of everything they took for granted, everything they dismissed, everything they ignored until the moment you stopped trying. And only in your absence do they finally discover the emotional capacity they never managed to show you, an awareness that arrives far too late to save anything. Their defense walls collapse. The truth slips in. All those I don't care moments, they cared. But fear was louder, and now regret is louder than both. This is the moment avoidants fear the most, the collapse of the narrative that kept them protected. Their walls were built from old wounds, old fears, survival instincts that convinced them distance was safer than vulnerability. Every time they said, it's fine, whatever, or I don't care, it wasn't indifference. It was fear trying to sound strong. But now that you're gone, the truth they ran from pushes through every crack. They cared deeply, more than they ever allowed themselves to admit. They cared in the way they saved your messages, but never replied fast enough. They cared in the way they wanted closeness, but panicked when it arrived. They cared in the way your presence felt safe, but terrifying, comforting, but unfamiliar. Fear used to be the loudest voice in their mind. Fear of being hurt, fear of losing themselves, fear of being vulnerable. But now regret overshadows it. A heavier, sharper voice that points out every moment they stayed silent when they should have spoken, every moment they pulled away when they should have stayed, every moment they let fear decide how to love you. Their walls, once so solid, become useless rubble as the truth floods in. They didn't avoid you. They avoided the version of themselves they needed to become in order to keep you. And now, with nothing left to protect them from the truth, they're left with one crushing realization. They cared the whole time, just not loudly enough for you to feel it. The painful irony. They always feared being abandoned, but it was their own emotional distance that caused the loss. This is the kind of irony that doesn't feel poetic. It feels devastating. For so long, their entire emotional framework revolved around the belief that closeness equaled danger, that vulnerability invited disappointment, that relying on someone only made the eventual abandonment hurt more. So they stayed guarded, cautious, emotionally restrained. They kept their heart wrapped in layers of distance, convinced that by staying detached, they were preventing pain. But now the truth stares them in the face with a clarity they can't outrun. The abandonment they feared didn't come from someone else's failure. It came from their own inability to show up. They were so busy protecting themselves from imagined hurts that they created a very real one. They spent years believing they had to stay hidden to stay safe, not realizing that the person they were hiding from was the only one who genuinely cared. And now, in the emptiness left behind, the irony becomes painfully obvious. You didn't leave because you didn't love them. You left because they never let you in enough to love them in a way that could survive. It wasn't rejection, it wasn't betrayal, it was exhaustion. And that truth cuts deeper than any abandonment they feared, because this time the loss wasn't out of their control. It was shaped by their silence, their hesitation, their inability to meet the relationship with the same heart you brought to it. The silent aftermath. They won't chase loudly, but they will break quietly, checking old messages, replaying memories, wondering if you ever cared, not realizing you cared the most. Avoidants rarely make dramatic confessions or grand gestures after loss. They don't appear at your door or pour their heart out in long messages. Instead, their heartbreak happens in silence. They sit alone with their thoughts, scrolling through your old conversations, lingering on the words you once wrote so openly. They reread the messages where you expressed hope, love, longing, messages they responded to with one-word replies or delayed reactions, because they didn't know how to handle the intensity of being genuinely cared for. They replay memories in their mind, not just the happy ones, but the painful ones too. The moment they saw disappointment in your eyes, the times you tried to talk and they shut down, the last time you looked at them with that mixture of love and hurt, that they didn't understand then, but wish they could replay now with clearer eyes. They wonder if you ever loved them the way they secretly loved you, but never admitted. They wonder if you moved on easily. They wonder if their silence made you think they didn't care. They don't realize the truth. You cared the most. You cared enough to stay through their distance, their fear, their emotional confusion. You cared enough to try again and again until trying drained you. And they will replay that realization over and over in the quiet hours of the night, breaking silently under the weight of a love they never learned how to hold until it slipped away. Avoidants don't fear love. They fear the moment they finally understand it, right when it's gone. This truth settles over them long after the relationship has faded, long after the messages have stopped, long after the routine of reaching for you has been replaced by an ache they don't talk about. Because For avoidance, love is never the enemy. They crave connection just as deeply as anyone else, sometimes even more so. But their fear of vulnerability twists love into something that feels dangerous. They don't fear caring, they fear what caring demands. And so, in the moment when love was offered freely, gently, consistently, they flinched. They misread your warmth as pressure, your affection as expectation, your closeness as a trap. But now, sitting alone with the ghost of what the two of you once had, they finally see the truth. Love was never the threat. Their avoidance was the irony hits harder now than ever before. When they had your heart in their hands, they struggled to believe it was real. But now, with empty hands and unspoken words echoing inside them, they understand every moment you tried to give them something safe, something secure, something steady. They understand your patience, your softness, your attempts to bridge the emotional gap that kept widening. They understand the way you waited for them to let you in, the way you hoped they'd meet you halfway, the way you fought for a connection they were too scared to recognize as genuine. They understand all of it now that it's too late to do anything with that understanding. That's the part that breaks them quietly, relentlessly, without mercy. Not the loss itself, but the awareness they only gained after the loss. They realize you weren't trying to control them, you were trying to love them. You weren't asking them to change who they were, you were asking them to show up. You weren't asking for perfection, you were asking for presence. And they finally see how simple your needs were compared to the walls they hid behind. This understanding doesn't come with dramatic tears or desperate apologies. It comes in moments of stillness, in the gap between breaths, in late night thoughts that echo louder than any conversation ever did. It comes when they see something that reminds them of you, when they hear a song you loved, when they catch themselves reaching for their phone before remembering there's no message waiting. And with every reminder, the same truth returns like a painful refrain. They didn't lose you because they didn't love you. They lost you because they didn't know how to show it until the moment the opportunity was gone. That is the real fear, the one they carry long after the relationship ends. Not the fear of love itself, but the fear of realizing what love truly meant only when they no longer have the chance to give it back.